What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie. Going to start a deep dive today into Black Sabbath studio albums. Just going to do the 70s albums, the 8 of those. Then we'll move on through the decades, maybe pair some decades up as the album releases get fewer in number. Zappa connection. Zappa was vocally outspoken about his love of Sabbath, especially I think it was like those mid-period 70s albums. I want to say either Sabotage or Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. He came out and had positive things to say about that. I think in 75 or 76 he introduced Sabbath at a show. I think Sabbath wanted him to come on stage and play with him, but Zappa, I think something along the lines of Zappa said he didn't want to like draw attention away from the band or something. Just like, come on, man, just come out and jam with the guys. But anyways, he had some love for Sabbath. But yeah, I mean, the OG metal, just their early stuff is absolutely amazing. Ozzy, the entire band, just absolutely. What else? There's nothing much I can say about them that hasn't been said elsewhere about Black Sabbath. I teach kindergarten, and a surprisingly number of kids in my class have had black cats named after either. My most recent kid had a cat named Sabbath, named after the band. But a lot of kids in my class have pets named after Black Sabbath songs throughout the years, which I think speaks well of their parents. But anyways, yeah, that's it. I'm just going to go through these 8. I'll rank them from 8 to 1, put the list on the screen when I'm done, and then you leave your comments and all that stuff. I don't think there's really any hot takes on here. I think the bottom, maybe in the middle section, maybe one slightly lukewarm take in the order, but everything else I think is pretty safe and shouldn't ruffle too many feathers. Not that I'm not looking to ruffle feathers, but that's just the way this one happened to play out. All right, that's all I got. Let's move on to number 8. Number 8 is their 8th in the 70s, Never Say Die. This came out in 1978. It was the last one with Ozzy until decades later in the 21st century. First off, what's up with that cover? Like, I know what's up with it. I know what it's a picture of, but why? Secondly, there's a lot of bands that I'm reminded of when listening to this that aren't Black Sabbath, that it seems to me like Black Sabbath is fully aware of what's going on in sort of the rock world, and they're tapping into other bands sort of like idea, their vibe. The opening track, which is the title track, Never Say Die, kind of reminds me of like Thin Lizzy, that opening. Like if they just tightened it up a little bit, kind of sounds like a Thin Lizzy intro. It's just sort of a blast of just straight forward, kind of unfocused adrenaline, that opening track. I think there's a lot of ideas on this album that like are good ideas, but they just don't ever come together. What else? Junior's Eyes, which kind of really doesn't even sound like a Sabbath song, reminds me of like if CCR flirted a little more with metal, Creedence Clearwater Revival. It has a really cool sort of Creedence Clearwater, like extended jam, Susie Q, Heard It Through the Grapevine, that kind of jammy vibe, which is interesting. Air Dance, which almost sounds like a B-grade version of Steely Dan at times, has this pop proggy action with a lot of piano. It's kind of all over the place. Doesn't sound like Black Sabbath, but kind of oddly interesting at times. Over to You, that riff reminds me of Foreigner's Feel Like the First Time, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. But then the song I don't think is as interesting as Feels Like the First Time once we actually get into the song. Breakout is an instrumental that has horns and has a sax solo and sounds nothing like Black Sabbath, but I don't even know what that is. Shockwave, that opening riff sounds like it could be like a Scorpions or even a Judas Priest riff. It's kind of all over the place. I know the one song that generally gets love on here is Johnny Blade, the second one, which I don't think is that good. Um, it's got, it's just the drum energy is kind of cool, but then you get these synth ideas that come in. The lyrics are like about the meanest guy in town, but it almost seems like it would work better if it was like a cleaner Jim Croce type thing, because that's the menace I'm getting from this. So it needs to be more of a bad Leroy Brown vibe. I don't know. It's just it's all over the map. The guitar solo energy in Johnny Blade is kind of good, but this album is just, I don't know. It just you can tell they're just kind of getting bored and going through the motions. They're experimenting with other types of music, which is kind of interesting, but I'm not sure any of it ever really pays off as much as it is like, oh, they did that. Um, it's kind of an interesting album in that way, but not interesting in your like early 70s Black Sabbath just awesomeness. More like a wow. It's like Halloween and they're trying on a whole bunch of different costumes and some of them work and some of them don't. But yeah, maybe they all should have just went their separate ways after this and just even though we got a good album or two coming up later. But anyways, yeah, very, very, very interesting, weird, but maybe not ultimately that good. Oh, Bill Ward sings the last song, kind of a generic hard rocker called Swinging the Chain. Ward gets another vocal. So, you can tell Ozzy was maybe had a foot out the door by this one. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Never Say Die. Well, apparently someone did and they left. But yeah, that's number 8. Number 7 is their seventh, 1976's Technical Ecstasy. First off, what's up with that cover? Yeah, I know what the cover is, but what's up with it? Um, they're just falling apart here in the end of the 70s. Um, this album is one of those where I think a lot of the initial like opening ideas are not that intriguing or maybe even feel recycled, but there's always maybe this secondary or tertiary riff that drops in at some point in the song that just like changes the musical landscape enough to make it be like, oh, I can't check out immediately because something really cool might happen later on in the song. I think there are two really, really strong songs on here. The second song, like the 6.5 minute You Won't Change Me, kind of flirting with the doom riff. We got a little bit of doom, stoner doom action, some really nice organ. Kind of sounds like an early 70s type track. Some great soloing, just some great organ drum energy. It just works and it manages, I think, to sustain my attention at least for the 6.5 minutes. And then the closing track, Dirty Woman, also kind of works well. It's got kind of a slower riff, some slower energy. Anytime they kind of like slow things down, not in a ballad sense, but in an intense kind of like doom, sludgy, stoner vibe, I think it kind of works. Dirty Woman's got some really nice, women, has some really nice changes throughout it. Nice long solo. It's the closing track. I think it kind of works well. But and then the middle, there's a song called All Moving Parts, which just has almost a dancey vibe to it. Like I'm thinking of the Stones in this era, how they would flirt with disco. And I think the Stones kind of pulled off their sort of, hey, let's dabble in other musical genres better than Sabbath did. But I'm getting a Stones vibe with a lot of this. Like, hey, a lot's going on in the world musically. We've already sort of created a whole new genre back when we started, so now we can dabble in other things. I just don't think they're as successful as the Stones were. But All Moving Parts, Stand Still, which is kind of all over the place, kind of wins me over by the end of it. It's kind of interesting. The opening Backstreet Kids has a nice gallop to it. Maybe a little Iron Maiden, just kind of that kind of metal gallop, but pretty much just like a decent hard rock song. Ward gets his first vocal on the piano ballad It's All Right, just a 70s soft rock vibe, which I'm not a big fan of. And then Rock and Roll Doctor got a cowbell. Seems like they've been listening to some Kiss, going for that kind of energy. It is not the Little Feat cover. The next song, She's Gone, is not the Hall & Oates, not a Hall & Oates cover. Sort of an acoustic ballad with some synth strings or some real strings, some keyboard strings. I don't know. Inconsistent album with some solid ideas on here. I think anytime they sort of musically reference their early years, I think the album's a little bit better and a little more entertaining. Not a complete waste. Definitely stronger, I think, than the one I just previously did at 8. But there's a drop off. I think this is the first one where it's just like, all right, we're running out of ideas. Maybe we're just kind of running on our on momentum at this point. But I can't say it's a complete waste of an album, and it's got some moments on here. But that would be my number 7, Technical Ecstasy. My number 6 is their number 6, 1975's Sabotage. This is a great album. Solid, excellent album. First half, the first side especially, is like almost perfect, despite this weird little abrupt cut and this odd little musical interlude that maybe doesn't need to be there, but it's there for some reason. Opens up with this crunchy, thick, hard rock, Hole in the Sky. Just a great opener. Nice and just crunchy and thick. I'm going to say that again. Hard rock. This weird little instrumental we cut into for like a minute, like a little less than a minute. Just this really weird, quiet little thing. And then we go to Symptom of the Universe, which is just this all over the map in the best way possible, just sort of mini epic. You get this straight up hard rock riff to open. You get like a nice little proggy middle section in there. And then we devolve. It's like a 6.5-minute song. At one point, we devolve into this almost like Doobie Brothers, Oh Black Water, Keep on Rolling type little acoustic folk country vibe in the middle that is just really, really, really nice and tasty, and a really good use of exploring other musical genres. It's absolutely fantastic. Really, really neat listen. And then that's followed by Megalomania, which almost sounds like if there was like a sort of sci-fi Western scene in the movie Heavy Metal, this would be the perfect soundtrack for that. It just, especially like maybe the first half of this, you get this really nice piano energy that enters in the middle. You get this sort of ending riff that reminds me of Motley Crue's Looks That Kill, only it's better. It's just, everything about this is a very like, the end is near. It's very foreboding. It's very just, it's like a 10-minute absolute epic, with all these different parts that work together really well. Just side A of this album is just a straight up like, kind of proggy, experimental, all over the map, just fantastic side of music. The second side is strong, but I think the second side, there's some sort of symphonic proggy elements that enter in that I'm not a fan of, at any decade if any band does it. So Super Czar, which is a great name for an album, for a song, I mean, Super and then Czar, Tzar. Awesome title. But probably one of my least favorite things on here. There are some great riffs throughout this song, but there's almost like this Disney Fantasia symphonic element in there that I don't need. Thrill of It All has some really nice sort of hard rock energy, flirting with a little bit of doom, but not quite committing to it though. It's got one of those that has a riff and then another riff, so it kind of keeps you engaged as it goes on. Kind of a mainstream vibe, but a good mainstream vibe. Am I Going Insane? Kind of nice. Kind of reminds me at times of Procol Harum's Conquistador, just that kind of energy, but kind of a fun song. Weird ducks or people laughing at the end kind of mixed together, and I'm not sure which one it is, but a weird little mental breakdown thing at the end. And then The Writ is this sort of ominous, kind of slow, kind of sluggish, kind of doomy, kind of sludgy closing track that's kind of cool. My number 6, absolutely fantastic side A, just almost perfect. I think if side B had maybe had 1 or 2 songs that can compare to side A, I think this maybe could switch places with something else. But as it is for their 6th album, I think it's a really, really enjoyable listen and something that I definitely go back to a lot just because the first half of this is so fantastic. But yeah, my number 6, Sabotage. My number 5 is their number 4. This might be the hot take on here, if mildly hot take. It's Volume 4, came out in 1972. And really there's one reason, changes. I don't like changes. Never been a fan of that song. In the early 80s, there was a live video of Ozzy singing changes that got heavy, heavy, heavy rotation on MTV, and it just drove me nuts. Just, yeah, it was like way too long. Always had to take a break at there. Had to remember to go back so I didn't miss any other good, exciting videos. But yeah, oh, and also after changes, there's this little instrumental of just kind of guitar noises that I don't think pairs really well with what changes is. Um, this is one of those albums where once you get a riff, 2 minutes in, there's usually some secondary riff that comes in that kind of changes the energy of the song in the best way possible. Um, but yeah, other than changes and FX, which I just does not pair well, this is a really, really, really fantastic album. Wheels of Confusion, 8 minutes of maybe not an epic 8 minutes, but a really interesting, things always changing. Has a very like almost piece of my heart type intro to carry us into the song before this nice heavy riff comes in. Love the lyrics of Wheels of Confusion, just about growing up and things changing and stuff like that. Um, Tomorrow's Dream, kind of a nice blues rock driven song. Nice middle riff in there that comes in. Great solo section. A lot of great grooves in this album. They're finding some really awesome grooves in here. Supernaut, nice tight opening riff, tight and driving. Snowblind, get a nice groove that comes in there, kind of a dramatic opening. Nice solo to end it up. The awesome cornucopia, we kind of get some slower doom energy at first before we kind of up tempo shift it. I wish we had stayed in the doom energy. I wish they did more sort of sludgier, doomier, stonier stuff. But whatever. Laguna Sunrise, an actually nice little acoustic piece that actually has a really nice melody to it that kind of works for me. St. Vitus's Dance almost has a garage rock 60s energy that's actually really cool. Just nice little bursts of adrenaline. And then the closing Under the Sun, kind of a nice slower groove for parts of this. Some nice guitar energy. A new riff comes in about 2 minutes in. Yeah, fantastic, fantastic album. I just never been a fan of changes, and it just kind of like being the third song on here, it just kind of slogs down the middle of side A for me. So yeah, interested to see how many people defend changes. But that's my number 5, their number 4. My number 4 is their number 5, 1973, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Swag, man, this album has swag. It's menacing. It's just absolutely, they're at the top of their game right here. I mean, not at the top of their game. We got 3 more albums to go, but they're feeling good about themselves. Opening Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, just a crunchy stoner riff to open this up. We get a weird, like almost soft, folky drop into like this nice breezy vibe, like an LA beach in the 70s type thing. Then we get this nice menacing groove comes in about 3.5 minutes in. Nice jammy ending with some psych darkness. Yeah, already in the opening track, we're kind of all over the map in the best way possible. But there's a menace to it, even when it's getting like soft and breezier. A national acrobat, the second song, still like a nice menacing groove in there. We get this sort of repetitive menacing riff that kind of goes on. We get some Hendrix nasty about 2.5 minutes in. Kind of gets a little bit funky, a little psych funk swagger drops in there. Kind of all over the place. We get this closing jam that kind of sounds like a high-speed chase. Just a great, great, great song. Fluff, an instrumental, is fluff, but it's good. Like a little acoustic pick, gentle medley thing. Sounds good. And then Sabra Cadabra, which just a great title. Kind of a ZZ Top boogie riff to open. We're almost flirting with like heavy metal ZZ Top territory here. But it's got that just like Sabbath intensity about it. Super catchy. We get like a nice synth spacey piano solo funky middle section that maybe kind of flirts with like a Fish style funk jam. Of course, Fish would come decades later or a decade and a half later, but still reminiscent of that kind of funkiness. And that's side A. I mean, side A is just an absolute beast of a side of music. Side B opens up with Killing Yourself to Live, just a nice, almost like Alice Cooper, very streamlined type menacing rock lift, like no frills, just get down to business type thing. A new riff comes in later that's really cool. We get like a nice spacey guitar jam that seeps in there. There's some almost like Leonard Skinner boogie type stuff that comes in with Iommi just absolutely shreddy on guitar. And then the last three songs, Who Are You, Looking for Today, and Spiral Architect, kind of lose some of that menace that the first five songs have, but they're not bad. We get a nice Who Are You as a very synthy, spacey intro, nice slow groove, kind of patient and restrained, but focused, very proggy, kind of indulgent. Looking for Today, upbeat, optimistic, almost sounds like a good radio song, nice ending jam. And then Spiral Architect, we get a nice little like acoustic intro before we get like a One More Holiday type cymbal action. So we get some big, almost Who-esque drops on here. Little too syrupy at times, especially considered the absolute menace that is the front half of this album. But as an entire album, I think it works really well. Yeah, it's all over the place in the best way possible. They're channeling Hendrix. There's some ZZ Top. There's some Cooper. There's some like almost like Fish funk jams. There's some Who energy, but all done in like a Black Sabbath-y type way. My number 4, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. My number 3 is their debut album, Black Sabbath, 1970. Of its era for a number of songs in which we get sort of we get a blues rock vibe a la Early Toll, a la Zeppelin, but then we also get some of the greatest doom stoner rock riffs in the history of music. The title track, the opening song to the album, the theme song for the band, the opening song, Black Sabbath, one of the greatest doom songs, stoner rock songs ever. It is menacing. It comes in slowly. Then Ozzy comes in and starts singing about Satan. Like there's there's tension for like the first 4.5 minutes, and then you get this sort of up-tempo release that sounds like a band of demons joining in, kind of like referencing a little Charlie Daniels there. This is what a band of demons sounds like. Black Sabbath, one of the greatest debut songs in the history of debut songs. What a way to kickstart a career. The opening track is just monstrous. The Wizard follows. We get a little more blues rock a la Zeppelin, but with like Sabbath energy. Blue Oyster Cult may have been inspired to write Cities on Flame with rock and roll with one of the riffs that are in here. Just great song. The US edition of this album, the next 4 songs were all bundled into one track. Wasp, Behind the Wall of Sleep, basically bass solo-ish, and then NIB. We start off with like a blues rocker a la Early Toll. We kind of slow down and go into more of a doom vibe for a while. Then we get some more like tempo changes that run throughout. We get a little bit of a bass solo, and then we go into NIB, which is another one of the greatest riffs in the history of music. Just absolutely fantastic. Side 2, only 2 tracks, but again, it's like a bunch of things are bundled into one. We get Wicked World, which is kind of an upbeat, playful, loose, blues jammy type thing. And then we eventually go into an absolutely monstrous riff. We get a creepy middle section breakdown. We get like a solo guitar spotlight at some point in there. And then the last track on the US edition is 14 minutes of A Bit of Finger, Sleeping Village, and Warning. Eerie opening, some riffs drop in, things get upbeat and frantic and kind of jammy around 3.5 minutes in. This sort of new riff comes in, gets sunny after a while and a little more upbeat. Yeah, and then it's kind of all over the map, but it's a lot looser. It's a lot jammier. We get a solo guitar spotlight in there. We get this nice swinging groove for a while with the guitar solo. The last minute, we turn to like a song proper and things get really hyper. It's a really neat, indulgent, almost proggy, metal, rock, blues, all over the place type song, or three songs combined into one. I think they were maybe separated it out on like the European edition, but for some reason here in the States, they combined them all. But yeah, yeah, that last track, very, very representative of the early 70s. Like, hey, we got to be jammy and indulgent and give the people what they want. But yeah, fantastic debut, fantastic album. Holds up today, 54 years later. When did it come out? Like, was I born yet? I think it came out right before I was born. No, yeah, it came out a couple months before I was born, so didn't get it as a birthday present, literally birthday present. But anyways, yeah, a fantastic album with one of the best opening tracks, debut tracks for a band ever, ever, ever in the history of ever. My number three, Black Sabbath. My number two is their number three, Masters of Reality, or Master of Reality. Adding S's and not adding S's to things. Opens up with Sweet Leaf. Sweet Leaf. Come on, man. Sweet Leaf. One of the greatest songs in the history of the world for a lot of reasons. This is 3 for 3 as far as them opening their albums with some of the greatest opening tracks ever in the history of ever. We'll get to the second one and the next one. After Forever, we get a spacey sci-fi sort of start into like an early Deep Purple sounding riff. Nice chunky groove. A different riff comes in about 2 minutes in. Two weird little instrumentals on here. Embryo is the first of them, sort of a classical guitar sounding piece. And then we get Children of the Grave to close out side A, which is a nice galloping groove in this thing, just absolutely ferocious. Really, really busy active percussion, some nice kind of proggy runs in the middle section. Almost a prototype for, I think, what Maiden would, bring to the world, in the 80s. Nice, eerie, haunted ending. Children of the Grave, just like almost a genre creating song. Side B opens up with another acoustic instrumental guitar showcase. Early on in my life, I wasn't a big fan of these, but over the years, I've sort of really come to sort of love the contrast that they bring to this album, especially since the heavier stuff that surrounds them is so epic. Lord of This World comes after Orchid on side B. Nice guitar solo jam, just a really nice riff to open it up. Solitude, we get another folky, airy ballad on here. And then we close out with Into the Void, which is just doom stoner awesomeness. Really nice long opening riff that seems to literally pull you into the void for like a minute plus before we drop into this new riff that also really still has this sort of stoner energy. And then about another 2 minutes after that, we kind of upshift into this really driving groove before slowing down to that stoner groove again. Yeah, a lot of stuff is happening in the void. We're all over the place, but every one of the like new riffs or new grooves is just as good as the one that precedes it. So you're never really wanting to go back. But then when they bring back things later, you're like, oh yeah, we're back to this. Yeah, just 35 minutes of, in a perfect world, maybe one of the acoustic things is not here and we just have more of a metal attack, but it's just a really, it's a neat album. And the stuff on here no way near bothers me as much as Changes does. And it's got Sweet Leaf. It's got Children of the Grave. It's got Into the Void. It's got just epic, epic, epic Black Sabbath songs on here. And I've said this before. I'm a sucker for opening tracks. And if you open with something as epic and iconic as Sweet Leaf, you will forever have me as an album. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. That is my number two, Master of Reality. And number one is their second album, 1970s Paranoid. I look at the track list on here and I'm like, can I really put this in number one? I've heard these songs so many times. War Pigs, Paranoid, Iron Man, Fairies Wear Boots. But then I listen to it, I'm like, yeah, there's a reason you've heard these songs so many times because they're absolutely incredibly perfect. That doesn't even talk about the other really playful stuff that's on here. War Pigs, come on, one of the greatest stoner doom riffs of all time. Just absolutely, absolutely fantastic. It's got the Here in the States, this was divided into two parts. We got War Pigs, and then that kind of awesome jam at the end was called Luke's Wall. No idea. But yeah, just absolutely, absolutely fantastic. Paranoid, which is like under 3 minutes. Like it's a short little song. That riff, those first lyrics, everything about Paranoid is just a perfect, perfect little song. Um, the one song on here that's kind of dated, that's I think very much of 1970, sort of Black Sabbath's what is it? What has become of the baby? What is the name of the that is it? What has become of the baby? The Grateful Dead song that's just really overly trippy and indulgent and kind of like probably made while on substances and not for everybody's you know, maybe everyone didn't need to hear it. That's what a Planet Caravan is. It's kind of Ween at their most Scotch guard like out there-ness. But it kind of works maybe a little bit. It helps that it's on a side of music that has War Pigs, Paranoid, and Iron Man. So it's almost like a breath that you need. And then you have Iron Man closing out side A. I always have an issue with Iron Man because I teach kindergarten in my classes. We have a Christmas program, or it's not a Christmas program, it's like a holiday program in December. And uh, every 7 or 8 years, once enough kids have cycled through that it's fresh again, the song we perform is Bob Rivers' I Am Santa Claus, which is an Iron Man parody. And we always do it a cappella. So the kids are like, dun, and they do the whole thing a cappella, but it's like, he flying through the snow. Can you hear him? Ho, ho, ho. It's hard for me to take Iron Man seriously, but, Iron Man. Side B, Electric Funeral, just opens up with this really thick stoner doom riff, utterly menacing, utterly fantastic, nice dramatic build in the middle. Hand of Doom, one of those that has a really nice quiet loud dynamics, go from loud to an awesome riff drop back into quiet, nice upbeat groove comes in about 3 minutes in. A lot of these, like the first album, a lot of these songs maybe could have been indexed for like a number of other different songs, just because you have so many awesome changes throughout them, especially on the second side of the album. But they're not doing that here. Hand of Doom, kind of nice prog metal thing in the middle as things are ever shifting and changing throughout it. Really nice solo, which is some just pounding, relentless drumming in there. Back into the doomy aspect at the end. Rat Salad, very playful, almost Deep Purple-esque type of rock jam, like the latter half of Lazy. Also kind of maybe a Moby Dick song with like a little drum solo in the middle, short little one. And then the closing song, which here in the States was Jack the Stripper into Fairies Wear Boots. I think on the original, it was just Fairies Wear Boots. The opening Jack the Stripper is almost like a early Allman Brothers type, just playful instrumental type jam, nice dramatic flurries throughout there. And then that goes into the absolutely fantastic Fairies Wear Boots. You gotta believe me. Gotta believe me, because Fairies Wear Boots. Awesome new riff. That's just absolutely awesome. The Fairies riff is absolutely fantastic. But yeah, from start to finish, the riffs on here are fantastic. The songs are fantastic. The menace is fantastic. Some of the doom energy is fantastic. You get a little indulgent with Planet Caravan, but I think over the years I've come to accept it and love it. But yeah, it's just a perfect metal, doom, hard rock, whatever Black Sabbath does. It's just a fantastic album. My number one, Paranoid. That's what they look like in typewritten form. Again, the only ones that I think may possibly, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what other people think, but whatever. That's my list. I'm rambling. All right. Let me know your thoughts on Black Sabbath, on your ranking of their albums, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's all I got. Go listen to some Sabbath, people. I mean, one of the absolutely essential, iconic bands in the history of music. What more is there to say? I'm going to do the 80s and then other decades and do all these albums. But yeah. All right. That's all I got. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Thanks for watching. You know how comments work. Let me know your thoughts on Sabbath. And yeah, I'm going to go listen to some Sabbath right now because it's the dawn of a new age here in the United States. And I have feelings about that. But anyways, all right. Peace Talk to you later.